The sun was shining brightly in the sky over Rio de Janeiro when Vinicius Jr. left home to take care of a few things. Despite his hectic life as a global football star, he still liked to personally handle certain everyday tasks. That morning, he decided to take his car for a full wash. After days of traveling and training nonstop, the vehicle was covered in dust and rain marks. He drove through the streets of São Gonçalo, the place where he grew up, feeling a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. Every time he returned, he mentally relived the journey that had brought him to where he was. The neighborhood where he had spent his childhood, the makeshift courts where he first dribbled, the street corners where he would kick a ball against the wall until nightfall. Everything was still there, almost untouched, as if time had frozen those places where he had once dared to dream big, too big for a boy from humble beginnings. After a few minutes on the road, he arrived at a small car wash. It wasn't one of those luxurious establishments he was used to in Europe, but a simple, familiar place, much like the ones from his childhood. He liked that. He parked, turned off the engine, and stepped out of the car. The heat was intense, and he immediately felt the warm air rising from the asphalt. "Hey, my friend, can you take care of this for me?" he asked the worker who approached, a cloth slung over his shoulder and a faded cap on his head. "Of course, brother. What kind of wash do you want?" the man replied, already inspecting the car. "A full one. I want it shining." The worker nodded and began gathering the materials. Vinicius stepped away and walked over to a small snack shop next door to buy a bottle of water. As he waited to be served, he overheard a familiar voice coming from the car wash. "That car belongs to a big shot, but the guy is a good kid, used to play for Flamengo. What's his name again?" Vini turned around immediately. The voice belonged to an older man, and something about his tone sounded strangely familiar. He looked toward the sound and saw an elderly man with graying hair, wearing a worn-out dress shirt and loose pants. He was sitting on a plastic chair, sipping coffee from a disposable cup. Something about his face triggered deep memories. Those tired eyes, that calm way of speaking. It was as if a piece of his past had materialized before him. His heart raced as he tried to organize his thoughts before stepping closer. "Did you used to work on buses?" he asked cautiously. The man looked at him surprised, furrowing his brow as if trying to recall something distant. Then, after a few seconds, his eyes widened. "Wait a minute. Are you Vinicius? That kid who used to catch the bus every day to train at Ninho de Urubu?" Vinny smiled, nodding. The old man let out a laugh of surprise and disbelief, slapping his hand on the plastic table. "Man, I can't believe it! The world is too small!" he exclaimed, still processing what was happening. The footballer stepped closer, pulling up a chair to sit down. His heart was still racing because now he was sure who this man was. A crucial piece of his story. Someone who had been there during one of the most challenging moments of his life, without even realizing the impact he had. "You used to let me get on the bus without paying, remember that? If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have been able to get to training." Silence filled the air for a moment. The old man stared at Vinny, as if reliving old memories he hadn't even known were still there. Emotion began to show on his face. The old man ran his hand over his face as if trying to believe what he was hearing. His eyes sparkled for a moment, filled with memories that seemed to come back like an old movie. "My God, so that was you, kid. I remember, I really do. Every day you'd come running, sometimes wearing a Flamengo jersey, sometimes in a worn-out uniform, always with that little backpack on your shoulders." Vinny smiled, feeling a wave of emotion rise in his chest. "Yes, I used to leave home early and catch that bus to go train, but I didn't always have money for the fare. You'd look at me, shake your head and say, 'Get in, kid. But bring the money tomorrow, okay?'" The old man let out a low chuckle, as if surprised by his own actions. "Oh, but I knew you wouldn't bring it," he joked, pointing a finger at Vinny. "But I also knew there was something different about you. I had never seen a kid so determined. Even without money, you never stopped trying to catch the bus, never stopped chasing your training." Vinicius felt a lump in his throat. He had never forgotten those moments. Every time he stepped onto that bus without paying, he felt a mix of shame and gratitude. He knew that the old man could have simply refused to let him in, could have told him to get off like many others would have. But for some reason, he didn't. You have no idea how much that meant to me. If I had missed those training sessions, I might have never made it. The man took a deep breath, stirring his now cold coffee with a plastic spoon. His eyes welled up for a moment, but he quickly disguised it by clearing his throat. You know, son, we go through life thinking some things are small, right? That a little money here or there doesn't make a difference. But look at this. He pointed at Vinny's car, gleaming under the bright sun. You became a world-class player, one of the best. And here you are, telling me that something so simple I did back then helped build all this. Vinny felt a chill run through his body. The old man was right. His gesture, which might have seemed insignificant at the time, had been a key piece in allowing Vinny to keep training, improving, and growing as both a player and a person. The silence between them was broken by the car wash worker, who approached while drying his hands on a rag. It's coming out perfect, bro. Just a few more minutes and it'll be ready. Vinicius nodded, but his mind was still caught up in the conversation with the old man. He looked at the elderly man in front of him and noticed his worn-out dress shirt, his calloused hands, his skin marked by time and the harsh Rio sun. He wondered how the man's life was now, whether he was still working, whether he was doing okay. And you? How's life? Still working on buses? He asked with concern in his voice. The old man gave a faint smile, but there was a certain weight behind it. No. I retired a few years ago, but son, retirement life here in Brazil isn't easy, you know? We do what we can. Sometimes I take on small jobs, help out here and there, but I'm alive, and that's already a blessing. Vinny felt a tightness in his chest. He knew that many workers like this man, who had spent their entire lives serving others, ended up struggling in their later years. And here he was, sitting in a plastic chair, sipping cheap coffee, after having been a key part of Vinicius Jr.'s journey without even realizing it. The player took a deep breath, feeling the need to do something. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a sense of justice. This man deserved something in return, something that could change his life, just as he had unknowingly changed Vinny's. Do you have family? Kids? The old man nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. I have 2 sons. One lives nearby, the other moved to São Paulo. I've got grandkids too, 3, I think. They come visit me when they can. Vinny studied him for a moment, then glanced at his own car being washed. He thought about how this man must have made sacrifices for his own family, just as he had made an unintentional sacrifice for Vinny. Then, an idea started forming in his mind. An idea that could change this man's life the same way. Years ago, he had changed Vinny's with a simple act. Vinny remained silent for a moment, reflecting on everything. It was incredible how life worked. Years ago, this man had changed the course of his life with a simple gesture, without even realizing it. Now, the footballer felt it was his turn to give back. He took a deep breath, looked at the old man in front of him, and with a sincere smile said, "You helped me without even knowing how much it meant. Now it's my turn." The man furrowed his brow, confused. Come on, son. I just let you get on the bus. It was nothing. It was everything to me, Vinny replied immediately, his voice filled with emotion. You gave me the chance to keep going to my training sessions. Without that, I might not have made it. The old man fell silent, stirring his now cold coffee with a plastic spoon. He seemed to be processing everything, as if he had never considered his small act to be so significant. Vinny stood up from his chair and pulled his phone from his pocket. He had made up his mind. Where do you live? He asked. Oh, I have a little house nearby. Small, but it's enough. Do you have a bank account? The old man chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, I do, but why? Because I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago, the player responded, already typing something on his phone. The old man's eyes widened. Son, please, there's no need. There is, Vinny interrupted firmly. You changed my life without even realizing it. I'm just doing the same." In the following minutes, Vinny called his manager and arranged for an immediate bank transfer to the old man. The amount? Enough so he would never have to take on another side job again. Enough to ensure he could live his remaining years comfortably without worrying about bills or hardships. The old man tried to protest, saying it was too much, that he didn't need it. But Vinny remained firm. "I know you didn't ask for anything, but I'm here today because, years ago, you gave me the chance to keep chasing my dream. Now it's my turn to give back." The man fell silent. His eyes started to well up, and he brought a hand to his face, trying to hide a tear that had escaped. "I never thought such a small gesture could come back like this," he murmured. Vinny smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave me a free ride on the bus. Now I'm just returning the favor." The silence that followed was different from any other. It wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It was filled with emotion, with memories, with gratitude. The car wash worker returned to let Vinny know that his car was ready, shining like new. But for him, that day had been about much more than just getting his car cleaned. He said goodbye to the old man with a tight hug, the kind that speaks volumes without needing words. As he got into his car and started the engine, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the old man still sitting in the plastic chair, staring into the distance, as if trying to process what had just happened. But Vinny knew that just as the old man had changed his life years ago, he had now changed his. And as he drove through the streets of São Gonçalo, a deep sense of peace filled his chest. Because he knew that in the end, life always finds a way to return the kindness we put into the world.